In the farthest reaches of the universe, beyond the stars humans know, lies a civilization of beings whose emotions are as complex as their minds are vast. On a planet shrouded in mystery, a psychological war rages, one that not only challenges their survival but also their very understanding of what it means to be alive. The aliens of Zyphar, a race once united by a single emotion, now find themselves divided by different psychological forces that threaten to tear them apart. As they struggle with fear, love, and resentment, their minds are fractured, each living in their own isolated universe. And as the universe watches, a strange visitor from Earth lands, bringing with them not just knowledge, but a power that could either heal or destroy. Will this outsider be the key to their survival, or the catalyst for their ultimate downfall? On the distant planet of Zyphar, a once thriving civilization now lies in ruin, torn apart by internal discord. The Zypharians, a race of beings capable of collective consciousness, once existed in perfect harmony, bound by a shared understanding of emotion. Their society had flourished for centuries, each individual linked to the others through a vast network of psychic energy, allowing them to experience each other's thoughts, feelings, and memories as one. The harmony they once shared had been their greatest strength. But now, it has become their greatest curse. The war with the Laru, a neighboring alien race, had shattered their unity. As the conflict tore through the Zypharian homeland, their psychic bonds began to fracture. The loss of their collective mind left them adrift in a sea of confusion, fear, and grief. Each Zypharian now faced their emotions in isolation, no longer able to share them with others. The once unified species was now a fractured one, each individual struggling to make sense of their emotions in a world that felt increasingly alien. In the midst of this turmoil stands Zorath, a once revered leader who now finds himself struggling to maintain control over his people. His mind is a battlefield, torn between the desire for unity and the gnawing desire for personal freedom. He longs for the days when they shared a collective mind, when their actions were driven by the greater good rather than the selfish desires that now dominate each individual. But Zorath is also haunted by the fear that they may never return to the way they were, that the damage may be irreversible. The air around the Zypharians seems thick with tension. The streets, once bustling with life, are now empty, save for a few wandering figures lost in thought. The once vibrant colors of their world seem dulled, as if their very planet is reflecting the pain of its inhabitants. The psychic energy that once connected them is now a mere echo, a distant memory of a time when they were whole. Zyphar is a planet in emotional ruin, and the minds of its people are shattered. With every passing day, Zorath fears that the hope of reuniting his people is slipping further away. The war had left Zyphar's skies silent, with no new voices or sounds of hope. Yet, one morning, something unexpected happened. A bright streak of light cut across the sky, followed by the thunderous roar of a spacecraft crashing into the planet's surface. The Zypharians, weary from their internal struggles, watched in stunned silence as the ship landed, its fiery tail dissipating in a cloud of smoke. From the wreckage, a lone figure emerged. It was Lila, an Earthling, a young human who had unknowingly slipped through a rift in space during a daring experimental mission. She had crash-landed on this alien world far from her own home, confused and shaken but determined to survive. Her spacesuit was damaged, her helmet cracked, yet her eyes remained wide with wonder and fear as she took her first steps on Zyphar's unfamiliar soil. To the Zypharians, Lila was an enigma, a being not bound by their psychic network, a creature with emotions and thoughts of her own. They had never encountered an individual who was not linked to their collective mind, and they watched her every move with a mix of awe and suspicion. What could this human possibly bring to a world already drowning in isolation? Among them, Zorath, still struggling with his fractured people, felt something stir within him. Curiosity, yes, but also something deeper. He sensed a shift, a potential to break the suffocating silence that had taken hold of his planet. For the first time in years, he felt an emotion he hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. But was it misplaced? As Lila stumbled forward, her gaze met Zoratha's across the smoldering landscape. A fleeting moment of recognition passed between them, though neither fully understood it. She wasn't like them, and yet she held something they had lost: the ability to connect with her emotions freely. Could she be the key to healing Zyphar's shattered minds? Or would her presence only serve to deepen the fractures of a world already on the brink? The stage was set. The Zypharian's greatest challenge had arrived from a distant planet, carrying with her not just the mystery of her origin but the potential to change everything. As Lila settled into the strange alien world of Zyphar, she quickly realized that the physical landscape was only a small part of the turmoil that plagued its inhabitants. The true battle was taking place inside the minds of the Zypharians, a psychological war that was tearing them apart from the inside out. With her arrival, Lila unknowingly became both a symbol of hope and a beacon of confusion for the fractured species. Zorath, the Zypharian leader, felt the weight of this internal struggle more acutely than anyone. Despite his desire to restore unity, he was trapped within his own mind, pulled between the memories of a time when the Zypharians shared a collective consciousness and the harsh reality of their present isolation. Each day, he fought against his own feelings of inadequacy, grief, and fear. The once powerful leader now questioned his ability to lead a broken people. His mind, once vast and connected to all, now felt as small and fragmented as the world around him. The Zypharians were not just battling external threats, but the very fabric of their own emotional existence. Some sought power to rebuild what had been lost, believing that dominance over their fractured minds would restore order. Others, like Zorath, longed for the unity they once had but feared it could never be regained. Each faction was trapped in its own emotional prison, unable to break free of the chains they had built themselves. Lila, observing their pain, began to see the depth of their suffering. She was human, and as such, her emotions were raw and personal, not shared or amplified by a collective consciousness. Yet she found herself deeply moved by the Zypharians' plight. She couldn't understand their psychic struggles fully, but she could feel their despair. A quiet sense of empathy grew within her, one that pulled her closer to Zorath and his people. But the deeper she delved into the Zypharians' minds, the more she realized that their emotional battle wasn't something that could be fixed with words alone. It was as if their souls were splintered, each fragment pulling them in a different direction. The tension built. Lila, a stranger from another world, stood in the middle of a fractured society, watching as their emotional wounds festered, unable to heal. The question now was, could she help them heal, or would her presence only ignite further conflict? As the days passed, Lila became more immersed in the complex emotions of the Zypharians. She could feel their pain, the lingering grief of a civilization torn apart, the fractured psyches of beings who had once been united in thought. Despite her initial uncertainty, Lila's compassion for them grew. She saw their collective struggle not as a weakness, but as an opportunity. There had to be a way to bridge the gap, to restore some semblance of the unity they once shared. But how? It was in the quiet moments, as Zorath and Lila spoke about the ancient histories of their people, that an idea began to take shape. Lila, with her human emotional depth, and Zorath, with his understanding of Zypharian culture, realized there might be a way to heal the fractured minds of his people. The solution wasn't to force a return to the collective consciousness they had once known, but to help the Zypharians accept their emotions as individuals, to reconnect with their inner selves. But there was one obstacle. Their psychic energy, still a powerful force on the planet, was wildly unstable. Lila suggested an ancient technique from Earth, a mind synchronization experiment. She explained that, in her world, humans used certain meditation practices to align their minds and energies. While Zypharians were far more advanced in psychic abilities, they had never attempted something quite like this. The idea was to synchronize their thoughts without forcing them to merge completely, allowing them to experience their emotions freely while still maintaining individual autonomy. At first, Zorith was skeptical. The thought of experimenting with such a volatile force seemed dangerous, especially when emotions were already so raw and uncontained. But as he watched Lila's calm and steady demeanor, he began to feel something he hadn't felt in years: trust. He agreed to participate in the experiment, hoping it would be the key to saving his people. The experiment took place in a grand crystal chamber, its walls lined with radiant gemstones that shimmered under the light of Zyphar's twin suns. The room was bathed in soft, ambient light, the air thick with energy as the Zypharians gathered around. Lila and Zorith stood at the center, their minds prepared for the synchronization process. Zypharians connected to each other, forming a delicate web of energy that linked them together. Each person's mind was a fragile thread, weaving together the psychic fabric of the group. The process was delicate, like tuning an instrument, and the slightest misstep could unravel everything. As the energy began to flow, Lila closed her eyes, focusing on her own emotions, channeling the energy she felt toward the group. The first wave of connection was faint but noticeable. The Zypharians felt the pull of their emotions, each one different, yet shared. Some felt the warmth of hope, others the cold of fear. For a moment, the chamber seemed to vibrate with the collective power of their shared experience. But then, the energy surged. Some Zypharians, unable to control the flood of emotions, began to panic. Fear, anger, and sadness exploded in waves, threatening to undo everything. Zoritha's voice, steady but firm, cut through the chaos. Hold. Focus on your core self, not the collective. With great effort, the Zypharians calmed, stabilizing the psychic field. The energy settled, and the experiment began to show results. The room was silent, but the Zypharians felt something they hadn't felt in years: a connection, not to each other, but to their own emotional core. For the first time in a long while, they were able to accept their emotions without fear of losing themselves. Lila opened her eyes and looked at Zorith. His face was still, but his eyes held something different now: understanding. The experiment had not healed them completely, but it had begun the process. The battle within was far from over, but at least now they had a chance. As the days passed, the Zypharians began to change. Slowly, the experiment that had once felt like a fragile hope began to show tangible results. The psychic energy that once felt oppressive and chaotic now hummed with a softer, more harmonious rhythm. The Zypharians had learned to accept their emotions, to feel them deeply without fear of losing themselves. But there was still much work to be done, much healing to complete. The battle within was far from over, but they had taken their first step toward true unity. Zorith stood at the heart of the crystal chamber, gazing out over his people. The tension that had once gripped their minds was now tempered with something new: understanding. No longer were they driven by the desire to dominate or to retreat into isolation. Instead, they were beginning to understand that their emotions were not weaknesses to be feared but strengths to be embraced. They were no longer trapped in their own emotional prisons. But as Zorith pondered this newfound sense of hope, Lila approached him. There was something in her eyes, something that told him the time had come for the final revelation. "Zorith," she said, her voice steady but filled with an urgency he had not heard before. The true cosmic secret lies not in what you've lost, but in what you've forgotten. Your minds were never meant to be fully connected as one. Your strength lies in your individuality, in your ability to understand and embrace your emotions on your own terms. Zorath frowned, his brow furrowing in confusion. But our unity was everything. It is what made us strong. How can we ever be whole again if we are not together? Lila stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. The unity you seek was always a mirage, a false promise. What made you strong in the past was not the collective consciousness, but the understanding that each individual is an integral part of the whole. You are not meant to be one mind, but many. The power of your race comes not from a shared psychic connection, but from your ability to connect with each other as separate, unique beings. Your greatest strength is the freedom to feel and think for yourselves. Zoratha's heart raced as the truth began to settle in. The collective consciousness had been a beautiful idea, but it had also been a prison, a place where individuality was sacrificed for the sake of unity. What he had once believed to be the key to Zyphar's survival had actually been a crutch that kept them from growing. The cosmic secret was not about regaining the past, but about moving forward, learning to live with their emotions, and embracing the beauty of their individuality. As the realization washed over him, Zorath understood. The Zypharians didn't need to restore their old way of life. They needed to redefine it. They needed to accept the full spectrum of emotions, joy, pain, fear, and hope, without fearing the consequences. Only then could they truly rebuild their society, not as a fractured shadow of their former selves, but as a new, evolved people. In that moment, a wave of clarity swept through Zorath, and he felt a deep sense of peace. The energy that had once been chaotic now felt calm and steady, like the ripples of water after a storm. He looked at the Zypharians around him, each of them standing tall and strong in their own emotional truth. They were no longer broken. They were whole, not because they were the same, but because they had learned to embrace their differences. Lila had shown them the way. The cosmic secret was not in their unity as one mind, but in their strength as individuals. And with that knowledge, the Zypharians were finally free. The future of Zyphar, once uncertain, now shone bright with possibility. Together, yet apart, they would rebuild, not as one, but as many. The true power of Zyphar had been unlocked, and with it, the universe would never be the same again.